There is a specific kind of moment that almost everyone dreads more than nearly any other social experience. The moment someone tries to humiliate you, often in front of other people, hoping to see you shrink, scramble, or lose your composure entirely. Your face goes hot, your mind goes blank, and whatever you eventually manage to say usually feels, even as it's leaving your mouth, like exactly the wrong thing. The Stoics faced this exact moment constantly, sometimes from emperors, sometimes from crowds, sometimes from people with far more power than they had. And they developed something remarkable in response. Not clever comebacks, not cutting insults, but 7 specific replies so philosophically grounded that they don't just survive an attempt at humiliation. They completely dissolve its power before it ever lands. By the end of this video, you will have all 7 of these replies, exactly where they come from in Stoic philosophy, and exactly why they work when almost every instinctive response fails. Stay with me until the end, because the 7th one is the one that changes the entire relationship you have with the fear of being humiliated in the first place. Welcome back to Accent Stoic, the channel where ancient philosophy meets the battles of modern life. If you're new here, welcome. You've arrived at exactly the right moment. And if you've been here before, you already know what we do. We go into the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, the letters of Seneca, and the discourses of Epictetus, and we pull out what has survived 2,000 years, because it actually works. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe now, because we go this deep every single week. The foundational principle: humiliation requires your participation. Get into the 7 replies themselves, we need to understand something the Stoics knew that almost nobody today has been taught. Epictetus, born a slave, a man who had every reason in the world to feel humiliated by his circumstances, wrote something in his discourses that sounds almost too simple to be as radical as it actually is. He said that no one can truly harm another person's character except that person themselves through their own judgments. Applied to humiliation specifically, this means something quite precise. A person attempting to humiliate you can say cruel things, mock you publicly, try to expose an embarrassment. What they cannot do, entirely on their own, is make you feel humiliated. That final step, the actual experience of humiliation, requires your own internal agreement with the idea that what has just happened diminishes your worth. Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Humiliation is perhaps the single clearest place this principle applies, because humiliation, more than almost any other emotional experience, depends entirely on an internal judgment about your own value being shaken by an external event. Someone can throw words at you. Whether those words actually land as a wound depends on something happening inside you that they do not control. Here is what almost nobody tells you about the person attempting to humiliate you in a given moment. They are seeking a specific reaction, visible shame, scrambling, a collapse of composure, because that reaction is the actual proof to them and to any audience that the humiliation succeeded. Without that reaction, the attempt simply has nowhere to land. The 7 replies in this video are built entirely on this principle. They are not clever comebacks designed to win an exchange. They are precise philosophical positions that remove the one thing humiliation actually requires to succeed: your participation in the judgment that you have been diminished. There's a useful way to picture this mechanism before we go any further. Imagine humiliation as a performance that requires 2 actors to complete: the person attempting it and you, playing the role of the visibly wounded party. The aggressor can deliver their lines perfectly in front of the largest possible audience with maximum cruelty and precision. But if the second actor simply never appears on stage, if you decline the role entirely, calmly, without drama, the performance has no second half. It becomes, quite literally, one person talking with nothing following it. This is not a metaphor for pretending you feel nothing. It is a description of a genuine, achievable internal state, one the Stoics spent their entire tradition training toward, in which another person's attempt to diminish you simply fails to produce the internal collapse it was counting on. Reply 1. That's your opinion of me. We begin with a reply that sounds almost too simple, and that simplicity is exactly the source of its power. When someone tries to humiliate you with an insult or a cutting remark, the instinct is almost always to either defend yourself against the content of what was said, or to counter it with an insult of your own. Both responses accept the premise that what was said requires a substantive engagement, as though the insult were a claim that needs to be either disproven or matched. That's your opinion of me does neither. It calmly relocates the insult from the category of fact into the category of perspective, without granting it any more authority than that. Epictetus taught the foundational distinction between things within our control and things outside it. Other people's opinions of you fall firmly outside your control, and more importantly, they do not automatically become true simply because they were spoken forcefully or in front of an audience. That's your opinion of me acknowledges the statement was made without accepting its content as an accurate description of reality. It is not defensive. It is not aggressive. It is simply calmly accurate because it genuinely is an opinion, regardless of how it was delivered. The power of this reply comes from what it denies the other person. Someone attempting to humiliate you is typically expecting either a wounded reaction or a defensive scramble, both of which confirm that their words carry weight. When you calmly note that what they've said is simply their opinion, you remove the premise their entire attempt depends on, that their judgment of you functions as an objective verdict rather than a subjective view they happen to hold. There's a specific reason this reply, despite its simplicity, tends to land with real force. Most attempts at humiliation are delivered with an implicit confidence that the statement being made is not just an opinion, but an obvious, self-evident truth that everyone present will immediately recognize as accurate. That's your opinion of me quietly punctures that assumed confidence without any hostility at all. It doesn't deny that the statement might contain some truth. It simply refuses to treat the statement as more authoritative than it actually is, a single person's view, delivered in a single moment, that other people in the room are entirely free to weigh however they choose, independent of how forcefully it was announced. Reply 2. I'm not going to perform embarrassment for you. This reply requires a bit more nerve to say aloud, and it works precisely because it names directly what the other person is actually trying to accomplish. Seneca wrote extensively about the theatrical quality of most social cruelty, how much of it depends on an audience, and how much of its intended effect depends on the target visibly performing the humiliation the aggressor is hoping to produce. Without that visible performance, the reddened face, the stammering, the scrambling, the entire social transaction the aggressor was hoping to complete simply fails to occur, regardless of what was actually said. This reply is unusual among the seven because it can be said with a hint of genuine amusement rather than pure composure, and that combination is often more disarming than complete Stoic neutrality. It signals something the aggressor was not prepared for, that you have correctly identified the actual mechanics of what they're attempting, and that you are declining to supply the one ingredient, visible shame, that their attempt actually requires to succeed in front of an audience. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the difference between what actually happens to you and the performance others expect from you in response. The Stoics understood that an audience watching a humiliation attempt is not actually evaluating the content of the insult nearly as much as they are evaluating your reaction to it. Refuse to supply the expected reaction, and the entire social calculus of the moment shifts in your favor, often without you needing to say anything clever at all. Reply 3. You clearly need me to feel small right now. This reply moves from defense into genuine insight, and it requires the most emotional discipline of any on this list, because it must be delivered with actual compassion rather than as a disguised insult, or it will simply escalate the exchange instead of ending it. The Stoics taught extensively that cruelty and the attempt to humiliate others very often originate from the aggressor's own insecurity, need for status, or unresolved pain, rather than from any accurate assessment of the target's actual worth. Marcus Aurelius wrote about waking each morning expecting to encounter people who would be difficult, arrogant, or unkind, and reminding himself that their behavior very often reflected their own internal state, rather than any objective truth about the people they targeted. Saying calmly and without contempt, "You clearly need me to feel small right now," accomplishes something remarkable. It names the actual psychological transaction taking place without pretending not to notice it, while simultaneously declining to participate in the emotional reaction the aggressor was hoping to produce. This is not the same as being condescending. Said with genuine curiosity rather than superiority, it often produces a moment of real disarmament, because very few people attempting to humiliate someone else expect to be met with something resembling compassion rather than either collapse or counterattack. This reply should only be used when you can say it and genuinely mean the compassion underneath it. Said with hidden contempt, it becomes just another insult dressed in psychological language, and the Stoics had no patience for that kind of performance disguised as wisdom. Reply 4. I know who I am, regardless of what you just said. This reply returns to something closer to a personal declaration, and its power comes from the fact that it does not argue with the content of the humiliation attempt at all. It simply asserts something entirely separate from it. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively in his private meditations about the concept of an inner citadel, a stable, settled sense of identity that exists independent of external opinion, praise, or criticism. He described this as something you retreat into, a fortress of self-knowledge that cannot be stormed by other people's words, no matter how forcefully those words are delivered. I know who I am, regardless of what you just said, is the verbal expression of retreating into that inner citadel in real time. It does not argue that the humiliating statement was factually wrong. It simply declines to let the statement be the final word on a matter that was never actually the other person's to determine in the first place. This reply works particularly well against attempts at humiliation that rely on generalized character attacks rather than specific checkable claims, situations where there is nothing factual to actually correct, only a broad judgment to either accept or decline. Seneca wrote about the discipline of self-knowledge being cultivated deliberately in private, precisely so that it would be available and stable in exactly these public moments of pressure. The person who has done this work beforehand can say this reply and mean it completely. The person who has not done this work will find the words feel hollow the moment they try to say them, which is precisely why this discipline has to be built in advance, in quiet moments, long before the actual humiliation attempt ever arrives. This raises an honest question worth sitting with. What actually builds the kind of self-knowledge sturdy enough to make this reply feel true rather than like empty bravado? The Stoics would point you back toward practices we've discussed on this channel before: the evening review, the private morning writing, the deliberate examination of your own values, independent of what other people reward or punish. A person who has spent months or years genuinely examining who they are on their own terms arrives at a moment of public humiliation with an answer already prepared, tested, and internalized. A person who has never done this examination and who relies entirely on external feedback to know how they feel about themselves will find that an attempt at humiliation lands with far more force, precisely because there was no settled internal answer to fall back on. If this is landing for you, drop a comment below and tell me, what's one situation in your life where you needed this reply and didn't have it ready? I read every comment on this channel. Reply 5. Say that again, slowly. This reply is unusual among the 7 because it does something almost none of the others do. It puts the burden of the moment back onto the person attempting the humiliation without a single word of your own actually engaging the content of what they said. Epictetus taught that provocations are often delivered quickly, relying on speed and social momentum to prevent genuine examination in the moment. A cutting remark, delivered rapidly in front of an audience, depends partly on nobody, including the speaker, having to look too closely at what was actually said. Say that again slowly removes that speed entirely. It forces the aggressor to either repeat something they may realize upon a second delivery sounds pettier or crueler than they intended, or to visibly back away from their own statement, which accomplishes much the same disarming effect as the original insult failing to land. This reply also buys you something valuable in practical terms: additional time, exactly as Seneca recommended in his writing on anger, to allow your own first, hottest reaction to cool before you decide how or whether to respond further. It is rarely delivered with hostility. Said calmly, almost curiously, it often produces visible discomfort in the person who delivered the original remark, because very few people expect to be asked to repeat an attempted humiliation more deliberately in front of the same audience that just witnessed it the first time. Reply 6. I've survived worse than your opinion of me. This reply draws directly on a specific Stoic practice, the recollection of past hardships successfully endured, deployed here as a source of genuine, grounded confidence rather than as a boast. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about the value of remembering, in moments of present difficulty, the difficulties you have already survived, noting that this recollection provides a kind of evidence that current adversity, however painful, is very likely survivable as well. Applied to an attempt at humiliation, this reply reminds both you and the person attempting to humiliate you that whatever they've just said, however sharp it felt in the moment, sits objectively far below the actual difficulties you have already lived through and come out the other side of. This is not about minimizing the sting of the moment or pretending it didn't land at all. It is about accurately placing that sting within the context of your entire life, rather than allowing it to occupy a disproportionate amount of significance simply because it happened publicly or happened right now. Marcus Aurelius, who buried children, endured plague, war, and betrayal throughout his reign, would likely have found most attempted humiliations he encountered from senators or rivals genuinely minor by comparison to what he had already survived. And this reply is simply the verbal acknowledgement of that same accurate proportion applied to your own life and your own history of endurance. There's a reason this particular reply tends to land with unexpected weight, even though it makes no direct reference to the content of the insult at all. Most attempts at humiliation implicitly assume they are landing on someone whose stability is fragile enough to be shaken by a single public remark. When you calmly reference genuine hardship you've already lived through without elaborating or turning it into a spectacle of its own, you communicate something the aggressor almost certainly wasn't prepared to encounter, that whatever they imagined this moment might do to you, it doesn't come close to touching the actual depth of what you've already carried and survived. This isn't a competition over suffering, it's simply an honest recalibration of scale, delivered calmly rather than dramatically, that tends to end an exchange far more completely than any counter-insult could. Reply 7. Thank you for showing me who you are. We've arrived at the final reply, the one I promised at the beginning would change your entire relationship with the fear of being humiliated, and it requires the deepest philosophical grounding of all 7, because on the surface it can sound almost sarcastic if delivered without the genuine Stoic sincerity it actually requires. Marcus Aurelius practiced a discipline of genuine gratitude toward difficult people and difficult moments, treating them as sources of information rather than simply sources of pain. In his meditations, he thanked specific people by name for showing him aspects of character, both admirable and cautionary, that shaped his understanding of how to live. Thank you for showing me who you are applies this exact discipline to an attempt at humiliation. It reframes the entire event, not as an attack that succeeded or failed, but as information about the character of the person attempting it. Said with real sincerity rather than as a disguised insult, This reply accomplishes something almost no other response can. It completely inverts the power dynamic the aggressor was hoping to establish. They intended to reveal something damaging about you in front of an audience. Instead, through their own choice to attempt public humiliation, they have revealed something about themselves, their insecurity, their cruelty, their need to diminish someone else to feel a sense of power. Genuinely thanking them for that revelation, rather than reacting with the shame they were hoping for, completes the Stoic reversal entirely. The information was real. It simply wasn't about you. Let's look at what we've actually built today. 7 replies. That's your opinion of me. I'm not going to perform embarrassment for you. You clearly need me to feel small right now. I know who I am, regardless of what you just said. Say that again, slowly. I've survived worse than your opinion of me, and thank you for showing me who you are. That together dismantle an attempted humiliation, not through counterattack, but through the calm removal of the one thing humiliation actually requires to succeed: your own internal agreement that you have been diminished. These replies function as clever tricks if delivered with hidden contempt or performed anger. Every single one of them depends on the genuine internal state the Stoics spent their entire philosophical tradition trying to cultivate, the recognition that your worth was never actually placed in the other person's hands to begin with, regardless of how forcefully, publicly, or cruelly they tried to convince you otherwise. It's worth being honest about something before we close. Every one of these 7 replies asks something difficult of you in the exact moment it would be hardest to deliver: genuine composure, precisely when your nervous system is flooding with the impulse to either flee the moment or fight back with equal or greater force. This is exactly why rehearsal matters so much here, more than with almost any other Stoic practice we've covered on this channel. Composure under provocation is rarely available on demand if it hasn't been practiced beforehand in calmer moments until it becomes something closer to instinct than performance. Marcus Aurelius rehearsed his responses to difficult people in the quiet privacy of his own writing, long before he ever had to deploy that composure in front of the actual senators, generals, and rivals who tested it daily. The rehearsal is not optional. It's the entire mechanism by which these words become genuinely available to you in the one moment you'll actually need them. Here is your challenge for tonight. Not 7 challenges, just one. Think of the last time someone genuinely tried to humiliate you, and notice honestly what you actually said or didn't say in that moment. Pick just one of these 7 replies, the one that felt hardest to hear tonight, and mentally rehearse it now, before you ever need it, so that the next time this moment arrives, and for most people it eventually does, you have something ready that doesn't require you to think clearly in the exact moment clear thinking is hardest to access. Marcus Aurelius did not develop this kind of composure overnight, despite ruling the most powerful empire in the ancient world, surrounded by senators and rivals who tested him constantly. He practiced it every single day in the private pages of a journal he never intended anyone else to read. That same practice, built one rehearsed reply at a time, is available to you starting with the very next moment someone tries to make you feel small. If this video gave you something today, hit the like button. It costs nothing, and it tells us this kind of depth is exactly what you want more of. Leave a comment and tell me honestly, which of these 7 replies do you think you needed most at some point in your life and didn't have? I read every comment on this channel, and I'll be down there with you. Subscribe to Accent Stoic if you haven't already. We go this deep every single week into philosophy that has survived 2,000 years because it was built for exactly the hardest, most ordinary moments of a real life. Until next time, stay grounded, stay rational, and remember what Marcus Aurelius told himself on the mornings the world felt heaviest. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength.